Just Stop Oil is one of those organizations that is succinctly described in the ancient texts, particularly the Bible, and the saying that says, thinking themselves wise, they became fools. There are some people on this world that organize around political ideas or religious affectations, and in complete and utter denial of reality, denial of common sense, denial of their powers of reason vested upon them as a human being, they will do some of the most immoral and destructive things and then justify it in the name of their cause. There are plenty of organizations throughout history that have done this, of course. You could even say that terrorist organizations, for effect, do this. In the name of jihad, they go ahead and they kill people. But of course, there are other organizations such as, the Weather Underground back in the 60s that went and blew up places to advance their political and social agenda. The Black Panthers back in the 60s, which had no problem intimidating people with automatic weapons and things of that sort. I mean, there are a lot of folks that do things that under any context would be seen as immoral, but because they are doing it in the name of something beyond them, they are convicted that it is correct. And I think that a recent interview with the Just Stop Oil spokesperson kind of underlies this sanctimonious mentality, which is endemic to so many of these environmental activists. But before we actually go to her, let's actually go over some of Just Stop Oil's greatest hits. They are known for fighting for climate change awareness by doing wondrous things to boost awareness, like, for example, shutting down public roads to make it harder for a mother to get her child to the hospital. Or, using themselves as barricades, laying on the roads to make it impossible for people to get anywhere at all.
He needs to go.
Wait, weasel!
He needs to go.
Sir.
Or interrupting musicals like Les Miserables to increase the awareness of their agenda. The list goes on and on and on, and there are, of course, plenty of other clips you can find on the internet of this organization acting in such an irrational way. But again, this doesn't just come from anywhere. This comes from pure sanctimony, and this also comes from a detachment of proper moral thinking. You see, I think in the West, people will say that we have a crisis of all kinds of things in the West. We have a crisis of meaning, a loss of meaning, of purpose, or whatever. But I think all of those things are actually downstream of the headwaters of the crisis we are facing in the West. And I believe that the crisis we're facing in the West is actually a crisis of moral education. If we lived in a society, if we lived in a world that actually valued the importance of first principles, objective moral first principles, and then also additionally saw those principles as universal, not just contained to a culture or a people or a religion or a race or an ethnicity, but universal, applying to man by virtue of his existence, we would then have the prerequisite to go ahead and instruct people on the best way to be a moral person, on how to follow the right as opposed to how you particularly feel. But in absence of that, when we bifurcate the world by classes and ethnicities and groups and races, and we just completely ignore any kind of commonality in our humanity, we can easily get a situation where man cannot be educated. He can only be talked to by people who are familiar to him. So I think that we have a fundamental problem of moral education. Not enough people are being taught about what ethics is, what sound morality is, and people then conflate ethics and morality with how they feel, and then they conflate how they feel with sound political action. If you can't tell me what a good ethics is, there's no possible way You can tell me how we conduct our governments or how we should conduct society, because politics is simply applied ethics. Social action is simply downstream of an ethical understanding. The Just Stop Oil zealots don't understand that, because that idea that I mentioned, thinking themselves wise, they became fools, that I mentioned, that idea is one that fundamentally undercuts principles that sustain man's life. Man is a being of potential, a being of constant growth. When man stops growing, he dies. A human being that does not grow is paradoxically not even a human being. In the definition of a human being, there is growth. But the kind of ideologies that Just Stop Oil push, such as the degrowth, as it's called these days, or what I call it, the no-growth, as it was originally called in the 70s, the no-growth ideology that man should be stuck to these primitive huts somewhere out in nature, and he should allow nature to consume him, and he should be a part of nature, not distinct from it. This is the no-growth ideology of Just Stop Oil that supposedly saves the earth, but it doesn't actually save the earth. It just prevents human flourishing, but it also stunts man and prevents him from increasing his understanding of his relationship with reality. But that has been the cornerstone of the environmentalist movement, the environmentalist cult, is the lie of no growth, is the lie that if man grows, nature suffers. No. If a man grows, he can then find different ways, better ways, to preserve the world around him. Yes, some people don't do that. But with more knowledge comes more opportunity to do good, but it also comes more opportunity to do bad. But it takes a dynamic understanding of the human being to even get to this conclusion, which the Just Stop Oil people just don't have. So let's look at this woman, a spokesperson for Just Stop Oil, who went on Sky News and had the audacity to say what she said. I will see you on the other side.
How worse does it have to get? How many kids have to die? How many more young people have to do this stuff? I don't know what else to say, Anna. Why aren't you on the streets with us? That's all I can say. How do you explain your inaction? How do you explain it? Everyone here, all the presenters that we talk to, how do you explain your inaction? How much longer are you going to keep this journalistic objectivity up? Until the water's lapping at your ankles? Until your own kids haven't got food? How long?
And for Just Stop Oil, what's next? Will you continue to disrupt events, or what's the plan?
Because it's morally wrong to not take the action that we know from history has got some chance of having an effect. People feel powerless. We are the opposite. When we come together, we have enormous power. There are so many more of us than there are of them.
Wow. What do I even say? First of all, as I mentioned, when you are motivated in your behavior by an emotional conviction that is not based on anything else other than your unchecked worldview, you are operating on the basis of an illusory idea, of an idea that you don't even know if it's true or not. How crazy is that, to be working for something that you are not even sure is true? You're only confirmed again by this conviction that has not been tested in any meaningful way. And this is not just a Just Stop Oil problem, although it is quite prominent here. This is a human problem. A lot of us have beliefs in our lives that we don't test, we don't check, we don't question, and we just assume they're true, and we just go chugging along throughout the world. And while I understand this approach, and I think that in certain ways there are some things that are just so self-evident that you do not question, that you do not check, because to do so would render life itself incoherent and chaotic. This is what the philosophical school that came out of Scotland in the 18th century, Thomas Reid School, called the common sense realists said. They basically said that you can't really question if you as a human being exist, because if you don't think you exist, how do you live life? You have to have some basis of common sense. But the problem is, when you go beyond that baseline of common sense, which should inform your existence of the world, your understanding of the world and your perception, you should then be in the mood to question what you see to ensure it aligns with that baseline of common sense. Common sense means nothing if it is not common, and it can only be common if it is reinforced by man's ability of intellection, reinforced by his mind and his investigatory abilities. Just Stop Oil is not in the mood to do that. They're in the mood to keep you in a primitive state where you can only feel and see as opposed to think. That's one thing that I glean from her statements. But then the second thing she said that was actually quite funny to me, she said, does it have to get to the point where the water's up to your knees or to where your children don't have food anymore? So this is, again, reasoning by catastrophe, and this is really something that a lot of people do. They tend to catastrophize situations on the basis typically of a narrow-minded read of a particular subject, like environmentalism, like climate change, as opposed to considering the wide range of possibilities. Is it possible that after 50 plus years after the Club of Rome came out with their charts saying that man was growing too fast, and eventually, if he keeps growing, the world will be overpopulated and we'll run out of resources. 50 plus years after their prediction, no such thing has happened. Wouldn't it be, in the spirit of intellectual humility, wise to revise your beliefs? This belief that, of course, these climate catastrophes continue to happen because man uses all these resources, a lot of it is connected back to Malthusianism. And Malthus couldn't really see the wide range of human potential because his ideas about man and his growth were restricted to his narrow understanding of the human being. He never questioned his idea of the human being. He simply saw growth, and he saw all of that as static. He didn't see it as dynamic. But as man grows, he invents. As he invents, he gains new ways to deal with the challenges of the world, and as the challenges of the world are dealt with in new ways, old predictions become obsolete. And yet the climate change cult, the environmentalist ideology, which, and by the way, there's a good book called The Roots of Environmentalism that I encourage all of you guys to read. It'll be in the comment section. It'll be in the description down below. It's a great book written in the 70s about all the ideas that subsume this idea. But this climate change cult, their entire goal is not to see human beings as dynamic and worthy of potential. It is instead to see human beings as just these predators that, when they go beyond the primitive state, become dangerous to everything around them. That is the belief. It is fundamentally an anti-human belief, and we have to lock into that if we're going to understand what Just Stop Oil was talking about. The last thing, though, that really interested me, she said, we're sick of this lie of journalistic objectivity. And I just want all of you to think, do you guys really think that for what we've seen over the past few years, with the mainstream media carrying water for the pharmaceutical industry when it came to COVID, the mainstream media, even before past few years, over the past few decades, mainstream media carrying water for the military-industrial complex, like the New York Times literally endorsed the Iraq War, the mainstream media carrying water for so many different cover-ups from the government, do we really, really believe, especially if you look at who runs the mainstream corporate media and all the political moneyed interests that are on the board of these corporations, do we really, really believe that the journalists or the media were ever objective? I understand if in the 60s you may have thought, oh my, Walter Cronkite's on the TV. Walter Cronkite seems so professional and so poised, and it's not his opinion, it's the news. No. Even Walter Cronkite had biases, and he used those biases to direct America into a direction that he believed America should go into, or the people who were talking in his ear believed America should go into. Look at Walter Cronkite's coverage of Vietnam, and you don't tell me that man had an agenda. He did. But the point is, I could excuse that belief back then. Can I really excuse that belief in 2023 after we have witnessed Chomsky's manufacture of consent come alive in so many instances? After we have the resources of the internet at our fingertips to understand that, yes, government agencies actively intervene in both social media and corporate media to shape narratives, but not only that, government agencies quite literally employ their former employees in these media spaces to then push the narrative, push the ideas of those agencies under the guise of ostensibly being objective. This is a matrix of connection that is undeniable to the observant mind, and yet this one wants to pretend as if, oh my, they're being so objective. Well, the fact that the corporate media, by and large, are on board with the climate change cultism, they're on board with the alarmism, what do you mean objective? This lady obviously has an idea in her head that is not true. Not the first idea she has in her head that's not true, but it's one of many. But then she says something that really just drives it home. She was asked, are you going to continue to disrupt events? And she said yes, because we have a moral obligation to do so. And this connects back to my first claim in this video. The problems of the West are not to do with a lot of the symptoms of these problems. They are to do, first and foremost, with a fundamental lack of moral education amongst the populace. Because morality has now become something equated with sentiment, equated with feeling. And by the way, this is an old idea that goes back in the history of philosophy called emotivism. And emotivism basically says that morality is relative, it's subjective, but it comes from emotion, it comes from sentiment. That's basically the basic idea. You have people like David Hume who believe a version of this idea. And it's been popular for a very long time, and there's been different forms. It's a form of moral relativism. But the point is this. This idea has really latched on to so many different people, and it has smuggled its way into their thinking without probably even many of them even knowing it. How many people do you know right now that will say to you, I believe that morality is subjective. It's just a matter of perspective. It's culturally relative. How many people do you know? You probably know at least one person. And even beyond your own individual anecdote, you can go and you can, through your powers of empirical observation, you can go and you can look at how morality is being taught in universities, how morality is being perceived by a lot of people in society, and you can see the ugly effects of the hydra of moral relativism rearing their head in our social discourse, in our institutions. So you can only justify, however, disrupting public roads, disrupting private events, doing all these crazy things, stop people from caring for their children in the name of benevolence. You can only justify these crazy inhibitory things by having an incorrect view of morality and really only having a relative view of morality. Because if your view of morality is based off of your emotions and based off of outrage, you can justify anything and everything. If your view of morality is based off of consequences, you can justify anything or everything. But if your view of morality is based off of the right TM, if it's based off of objective principles, laws that exist in nature that we can, through our human reason, deduce and understand and apply to our world, if it's based off of that, then my God, the room for error is very small. It's not completely gone, but it's small. We have a crisis of moral education in our country. And the climate terrorism and social disruption sowed by groups like Just Stop Oil is yet another symptom of this problem. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to have a strong society of people who are not just strong-willed, but are also strong-minded. Only weak-minded people think that disrupting people's lives and other acts of social terrorism, stochastic terrorism, are morally justifiable. Only a fool can justify what is self-evidently wrong to any person with common sense with such conviction and such vigor. Only someone who lives in the world of illusion, who lives in Plato's cave and refuses for all of their life to look up at the entrance of the cave and see the sun. Only a fool can do that. And yet we have a lot of fools running our countries, a lot of fools running our universities, a lot of fools running these NGOs, a lot of fools are running rampant and they're having their way with the West. Are you tired of it? I'm tired of it. We need a revolution of the mind. Study philosophy, study history, like this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel, donate to me if you want to help me get my message out there. All my information is on the comment section down below. We have locals, we have PayPal, we have Patreon, we have Buy Me a Coffee, we have everything. It's all in the comments down below, my friends. I love all of you. Question your beliefs. Contain your emotions. Don't allow blind passion to carry you away. Reject the creeds of alarmist philosophies that lead to nowhere but false benevolence. And most importantly, my friends, I want you all to stay pensive. I love every single one of you. You have a nice night.